Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are on chapter 44, verse 34. Chapter 44, verse 34. This is the end of Yehuda's pitch to Yosef, or demand to Yosef that he should let Binyamin go back to the land of Israel. And Yehuda says, Ki eich el avi, how can I go up to my father? Va'anari nenuiti, and the lad is not with me. Pen erev hara asher yimtza savi, lest I'll find the ill which will find my father. This is an eminently understandable pasuk. Yaakov is clearly going to be beyond distraught that Binyamin doesn't come back with them. Having said that, there's a very interesting Ramban on this pasuk. Ramban on pasuk Yudalad v'Yomar Ki'ech el avi lodio ki yivchar lios eved olam me'aloso el aviv bilti anar shlo yuchal liros beraso. So the Ramban says what Yehuda is conveying to the viceroy of Egypt is, it's not just that I'm negotiating with you. Honest to goodness, I'd rather stay here in Egypt with you than go back to my father. In other words, my father is going to be so distraught. I don't want to deal with it. So it's not just like, oh, come on, be nice. It's honest to goodness, I'd rather be a slave to you than go to my father. Very sad. So it's a very interesting wrinkle the Ramban puts in. Yehuda is a physically capable person, far more so than Binyamin. So he says to the viceroy, why don't you take me as a slave instead of Binyamin? Maybe the viceroy is thinking to himself, are you joking? You want me to take you as a slave because you're going to be much more likely to stage an escape than your brother would. So Yehuda says to the viceroy, I'm telling you, I have no desire to go back there if I'm not going to have Binyamin with me. So I'd rather be here. It's just an interesting. Okay, let's go on now to chapter 45, verse 1, one of the most famous psukim in this whole saga. I want to translate this literally, even if it'll be difficult to understand the meaning, because I want to make the point that the pasuk is a difficult pasuk. Yosef was not able to hold back to all of the people standing over him. It's hard to even understand on a basic level what those words mean. Vayikra, and he called out, Hotziu cholish me'aloi, get everybody out of the room. I want everybody out. V'lo amad ishito, and no one was with him. Bisvada Yosef elecha. In Yosef's revealing himself to his brothers. What's so interesting about this opening phrase of the pasuk is people like to quote the first part of the phrase. Yosef couldn't hold it in anymore. Yosef had to reveal himself, but it says he couldn't hold it in with all the people there. What's that about? What does it mean with all the people there? And that's, of course, the connection between Yosef telling them all to leave. I want to clear the room, just me and the visitors from Israel. It's still difficult to understand. So let's see the Ramban. He starts off by citing Rashi, Ramban on Pasuk Aleph. Lo yachol Yosef lisapek l'chol hanitzavim alav. Lo yachol lisbol shiu hamitzrim nitzavim alav v'shomim she'echav mispaishin b'hodau lahem. Lashon Rashi. So this is going to be humiliating to the brothers. This is the brother that they sold. This is the brother that they know it's their fault that he's been long gone. And he's about to reveal himself to them. The shame that the brothers will feel at that moment will be beyond. So this is an amazing Rashi to think about. Rashi is saying, the pasuk is saying, Yosef wasn't able to handle the embarrassment that his brothers would feel in front of all of the people. So he felt compelled, clear the room. Tremendous sensitivity to the people who sold him as a slave. Rabbi Avram Amar, Lisapek Lispol, L'chol hanitzavim alav, Tamo, Ad sheyetzu kol hanitzavim alav, V'hutzrach likro lo tziyam. So the Ibn Ezra says something that's probably more in step with what we would have imagined. The Ibn Ezra says, Yosef was on the verge of totally bursting, and there wasn't time for him to allow the standard, everyone leaves the room, whatever they file out after the meeting. the retinue files out. So he had to give instructions. I want everybody out now. And he couldn't have held in his feelings longer. This is one of many examples that we see in this story. Yosef was a person of tremendous emotion. We're going to see it in following Sukkim and Parshios. Aval uncles term this chasana lischaze chen misapakvis va'esapakva v'chen kolosh nisapkus b'chamakom chozek. So the Ibn Ezra says he couldn't hold it in anymore. Uncles says it's a language of, or I'm sorry, the Ibn Ezra says he couldn't tolerate anymore all the people being there. Uncles says it's a language of he couldn't sort of gird himself anymore. Now the Ramban's view, va'nachom beinai, I think the pshat is shayushami beis paro ben amitzrim anashim rabim. There were a lot of people in the room. A lot of people from the Egyptian court. Yichalu panav limcho lebinyamin. You can imagine this, right? You have all these people turning to the viceroy of Egypt. Oh, come on. Just let the boy go home to his old father. Whether or not Yehuda impacted the viceroy of Egypt, Yehuda impacted everybody else in the room. So all this was a real, pulling of the heartstrings. So they're all beseeching Yosef. The Egyptians are saying to Yosef, let the Jew boy go home. That's what's going on. He couldn't handle it. All these people were driving him b'shuga. Get all these Egyptians out of the room. I'm tired of everybody telling me to be nice. And so then the Egyptian retinue went out. Once everybody left, then he gave out a great cry. The next pasuk talks about how Yosef let out a great cry, and everybody heard. Ramban says the pshat in that is they just left the room, right? Ask the office staff what interesting things they hear from my office when I get worked up on the phone with somebody or another, right? In other words, I try to turn on my sound machine when I realize I'm going to get worked up. But the bottom line is that when a person's screaming, you can hear it in the next room. Okay, in other words, part of what the Ramban is grappling with is when it talks about these people standing over him. So up until now, the Ramban has been explaining standing over him means like you imagine the body language of standing over a person, like, come on, be nice to him. It could be Anitzavim Alav standing over him just means his aides, like people standing by him, we would say. So according to the Ramban, Yosef had, in other words, according to other Mefarshim, Rashi, the Ibn Ezra, certainly the Ibn Ezra, Yosef is like ready to burst. According to the Ramban, he's not ready to burst. He just can't handle all these Egyptians keeping on bothering him. So he says, get everybody out. But why did he want them out at this moment? If he's about to tell the story and to tell them he's going to be nice to them, why did he want the Egyptians out? So the Ramban explains he's about to talk about the sale, his sale as a servant. Kitialem l'cherpa. It's going to be embarrassing to his brothers. This is really important. Not only if the Egyptians hear this, will it be embarrassing to his brothers, it will be bad for Yosef's professional reputation. Sheyomru avdei paro u'mitzrayim aleim elu anshe bogdos. The people in Paro's court will say, you can't trust this family. Lo yaguru ba'artzenu v'lo yidruchu ba'armanosenu. These people sold their own brother as a slave. We don't want them to live here. Who would want people like this? We don't want them in our palace. Bagdu ba'achayim. They betrayed their brother. Gam ba'aviyam bagdu. And they betrayed their father. Mayasu b'melech ba'amo. If this is how they treat their own family, will they be loyal residents of Egypt? Probably not. Begam b'Yosef lo yaminu od. And one more thing the Ramban says, they're not going to trust Yosef as much anymore. If you remember, we mentioned earlier that actually it was going to be good for Yosef, ultimately, when they're revealed, because they're a distinguished family. And all of a sudden, the impression of Yosef will no longer be some slave boy who ended up in Egypt, but a person from a distinguished family through a strange chain of events ended up in Egypt. But that's true. But this story about his brothers selling him as a slave is extremely unflattering to his brothers, could impact the will of the Egyptians to allow his brothers to move to the land of Egypt, and could impact how they even see Yosef, because he might be coming from a prominent family, but he doesn't seem to be coming from a very good family. So it's a really interesting thing. So we saw a number of ideas here. Now let's see the Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim Pasuk Aleph. V'lo yachol Yosef lisapei perish shlo otzar koach lahamtin ad sheyetzu kol hanitzavim me'atzman. So like we already saw, he says the pshat is that he couldn't wait until everybody kind of went out on their own schedule. V'kara b'kol gadol hotzio cholish, and he let out like a large cry, like get everybody out of here. Perish b'meheira. Lo shiyomu lem lotzeis. Not, we're going to file a request that people have to go. It's get out now. When you know how it is after a meeting or a shir or whatever it is, when people leave, they kind of wander out. And this one's in shmuz. If the viceroy screams everybody out, they'll all get out. And he wasn't interested in it taking a long time. They all went out together real fast. Bisvada Yosef perish. The reason he cleared the room is because he's about to reveal himself to his brothers. Perish hakaras davar kadei sheyakiru v'yatzdiku kihu Yosef. Why did he have to tell them about the sale now? They know that they sold him. He doesn't have to tell them. He doesn't have to tell them about the sale. Says the Orach Chaim, they need to hear from him about the sale as proof that it's really him. The Dover said, in order for them to believe it's him, he needed to convey to them all these information about the sale. Lo letzido, kukarok bekol, v'shamu kol yiris hadavar, el tzad boshas echav, husha'asa mitam haniskar. So really, really interesting. I might be misunderstanding. I think what the Orach Chaim is saying is, and I'm sure some of you were wondering this, in the next verse it says he let out a cry and everybody heard. Everybody heard what? Doesn't it sound like everybody heard the next pasuk? Yosef said to his brothers, I'm Yosef. Doesn't it sound like that's what's going on? So the Ramban said everybody heard his cry. Or it's not that everybody really heard. That's how the Ramban understood it. Like his cry was very loud. I guess he kind of got a grip of himself afterwards and he spoke more softly. The Orach Chaim says they're all going to hear this. There's no way this story isn't going to get out. And by the way, they all heard it through the wall in a moment because he was speaking so passionately and loudly. It's not the information. It's just he didn't want that people should see their faces. Their moment of total shock and embarrassment. By the way, if you glance at verse 3, they couldn't answer back to him because they were so shocked. He didn't want the Egyptians to see the looks on their faces. So just an interesting thing. So we've seen a few ideas. We've seen he didn't want the brothers to be embarrassed. That could either be he didn't want the brothers to be embarrassed that the Egyptians should know the fact. It could be that he didn't want the brothers to be embarrassed that the Egyptians should know the reaction. And we also have this idea that if the Egyptians knew the facts, that could impact a lot. That's more than just unpleasantness for the moment for the Egyptians, for the Jews. It could be much worse than that. So we discussed what it means Yosef couldn't hold it in and why did he clear the room. We also discussed what Yehuda is saying to the viceroy when he says, I don't want to go back to my father. I apologize. Today I have to run, so I'm not going to be able to take any comments. Wishing everybody a great day. Take care.